Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending this webinar on COVID and immigration with a focus on Canada. My name is Lanier Robbins, and I am the director of the Global Chamber Miami. The Global Chamber Miami is a part of the Global Chamber Network, a thriving community of professionals, mentors, and innovative companies taking on the world of global business. We provide information, connections, and mentoring for leaders to capture global business opportunities operating across 525 metros within 195 countries. With me today are esteemed speakers and Ms. Mijong Hibbets, Director of the Global Chamber, Baltimore, DC, who I would like to now introduce.
Thank you very much, Lanier. Hello, everyone. My name is Mijong Hibbet, and I'm the Executive Director of the Global Chamber of Baltimore, Washington, D.C. Today, it is my great honor and privilege to introduce Senator Ben Cardin of our great state of Maryland as the keynote speaker for our webinar on the topic of immigration. Senator Cardin was first elected to the US Senate in 2006 as a Democrat and currently serves as chair of the Small Business and Entrepreneurship Committee, which is at the forefront of rebuilding our economy. Senator Cardin is also a senior member of the Senate Foreign Relations, Finance, and Environment and Public Work committees. Before being elected into the Senate, he represented Maryland's 3rd Congressional District in the United States House of Representatives from 1987 to 2006 and served for 17 years on the Ways and Means committees. He has been a national leader on the biggest and most important issues facing this country, from healthcare, retirement security, the environment, and physical issues, along with immigration issues. He has also worked across party lines to further US national security and to ensure that good governance, transparency, and respect for human rights are integrated into American foreign policy efforts. Senator Cardin, we appreciate the opportunity to hear your perspective on immigration and how US immigration policy will affect small, medium-sized businesses across America. Due to the senator's schedule, we will have a short Q&A after his remarks. So for those of you who have questions for the senator, please leave them in the chat box so that I can ask to him. Then without further ado, please join me in welcoming Senator Ben Cardin.
Mijong, I think you can hear me. I'm not sure the video is working. But let me first thank you very much for inviting me to be with you today. Oh, and now I can start my video. Let's see. Oh, there we go. Mijong, let me start over again. Thank you very much for having me here. I appreciate it very much. We appreciate what the Global Chamber does. It's wonderful to have Maryland and Miami together on this opportunity to talk about immigration, to talk about business, to talk about how we can build back better, which is President Biden's motto. And we've been extremely busy so far this year. We're coming up to the first 100 days of the Biden administration. And we have been very, very actively engaged in President Biden's agenda. So I think this is very timely, this discussion. Let me thank Reverend Jerome Stevens and my staff for making the arrangements for me to be on this broadcast. And let me just briefly cover some of the major issues as it relates to President Biden's Build Back Better. You saw his actions on the first major bill that was passed, which was the American Rescue Plan. It was really a dynamic bill, unprecedented in modern times, on its focus to try to build back our community stronger and better. It focused the resources on those who need it the most. It provided significant help to get children out of poverty. 50% of the children of America were lifted out of poverty. It provided the financial help to the lowest quintile They received a significant increase in their after-tax income of 20%. I say that because that all is added to the dynamic reaction of our economy. We are coming out of COVID-19, and we really do need to energize our economy so that we can get back to the pre-COVID and exceed the pre-COVID levels in economic growth. I was directly responsible for dealing with the provisions affecting small businesses as the now chairman of the Small Business Committee, previously the ranking Democrat on the Small Business Committee. And what we did, starting with the CARES Act last March, was to provide a substantial amount of help to small businesses, because we know that they are the growth engine of America. That's where more jobs are created. That's where innovation takes place. But small businesses aren't as resilient as larger companies. And when you go through an economic downturn, and COVID-19 was certainly a major economic downturn for our economy, small businesses need help. So we created new programs starting last March, the Paycheck Protection Program being the largest. But in total, we made $1 trillion of federal assistance available to our small businesses. The largest program by far being the Paycheck Protection Program, which to date has provided help to 9.6 million small businesses to the tune of $758 billion. We got money out quickly. And then we recognized that we have to do a better job in targeting. So as the program evolved, as we modified it over time, we targeted the relief to the small businesses that needed the help the most, those that have had revenue losses, those that are the smaller of the small businesses, those located in underserved communities, those that are in the underbanked community. And we provided additional help to mission lenders, because we know that they would be available in the underserved communities. We relied on commercial lending under the 7A program for forgivable loans, but we knew that underbanked communities were going to need special help. So we provided additional resources for mission lenders such as CDFIs and minority depository institutions. But then we also provided help for those businesses that could not operate at full capacity because of government orders. So recently we've provided new programs for shuttered venues, our entertainment venues, our movie houses, our museums, and for restaurants that were required to operate at lower capacity because of government orders. These programs are working, and we are seeing a light at the end of the tunnel. I'm currently working on some additional programs, including providing venture capital for minority businesses in emerging markets, to programs that would partner with our 8 historically Black colleges and universities and minority depository institutions to develop startup companies with the incubators and accelerator programs so that they can thrive and grow, to make programs that have worked well, such as the 7A Community Advantage Program permanent, and to deal with minority business resiliency by making the MBDAs a permanent fixture rather than just by executive order. I say that as way of background, but one of the major issues that small businesses have is workforce. Where do they get their workers from? And one of the areas of Build Back Better is to make sure that we not only have the best trained workforce here in the United States, but we also have an immigration policy that makes sense from American values and from American economic needs. And I want to start off by just saying, in regards to immigration, President Biden was dealt a very difficult set of circumstances when he took the oath of office on January the 20th. I say this not in a partisan way, because I really do believe that President Trump's immigration policies did not represent American values. And our strength as a nation is in our values. But when the former president put restrictions basically on the type of country based upon its religion, known we affectionately call the Muslim ban, that was a signal not only about what America was doing on immigration policy, but to the global community of the lack of leadership of the United States in dealing with the global needs. We know we have more displaced people today than we've had since the end of World War II. We know that we need to have aggressive policies to deal with people who are desperate. That means you have to deal with refugees, you have to deal with people who are seeking asylum, you have to deal with people who are just in desperate need in order to take care of their families. And the Trump policies did just the opposite by dividing families at our borders, by making it clear that they were not welcome, by putting up a fence that made no sense at all. All of this added to the challenges that President Biden had on the first day of his office. He reversed what he could by executive orders, and he did that effectively. We now have a challenge of what to do on our southern border. The President Biden is clearly has a policy to make sure that we protect minor children at our borders and we don't divide families. That change occurred immediately. But we have to deal with the stem of immigrants or the refugees coming in from our southern border. How do we handle that? And quite frankly, it's been a challenge. The best way we can deal with that is to deal with the core problems. And I know when Joe Biden was Senator Biden and then Vice President Biden, he was one of the active leaders in dealing with programs for Central America that would deal with the core problems of why people leave their home country. They leave because they're fearful of their security with gang activities for their children. They're fearful because of corruption in their country. They're fearful because of the drug trafficking. And we need to deal with the core problems of Central America if we're going to deal with in other areas, if we're going to deal with the flight of migrants that are coming out of those countries. That's one of our principal objectives as we look forward. But we desperately need comprehensive immigration reform. I'm a co-sponsor of the Menendez bill that deals with comprehensive immigration reform. It deals with the issues, and by the way, President Biden supports comprehensive immigration reform. It deals with the issues of those that are here legally under temporary protective status, giving them a permanent status and pathway to citizenship. It deals with those who are DACA registrants, our dreamers, by giving them a permanent status and a pathway to citizenship. It deals with the issues of our worker visas in numbers and in a way that makes it realistic for the workflow that's necessary for our economy. It deals with the issues of immigration. It also deals with, by the way, the core problems of why we have migrations from certain countries, particularly in our own hemisphere. So it does deal with the issue in a comprehensive way. For those who say you can't get that done, in 2013, the Senate passed the similar bill by an overwhelming majority. We can do this again, and we need to do this again. In the meantime, we are urging the Biden administration to take steps to have our refugee numbers more reflective of our traditional numbers, and for America to have an asylum policy that is recognized as the global standards for how asylum cases need to be handled, and to once again assume international leadership in regards to those individuals who are displaced and are looking for a place for a safe home. So we want to see America reestablish itself. We want it to be based upon our values, and we want it to promote universal values that reflect the best for the global community. We're far from that today. We're still in crisis. There's no question about it. And we need to focus on getting the job done first on a temporary basis to make sure people are protected who are currently in transit and are in desperate situations, and then to change our immigration laws to reflect the values of America, and then for America to assume its position in international leadership, to work with the global community so that the global community does its policies that reflect what's right for people who are desperate and have to leave their homes. With that, let me turn it back to you, and I'll be glad to take a couple, some friendly questions.
Thank you, Senator Ben Cardin. Thank you very much for your leadership with the immigration, and as well as also business and small business leadership. And there are some questions I see here from the attendees. Some of them are on the immigration and some are for actually businesses. One attendee asked, what is your advice for those in the process, including refugees, and how should business executives in Maryland and Miami should be reacting and planning in the coming months and years? Is immigration getting back to normal, and what can we expect?
I've been to the southern border. I've been to McAllen, Texas. I've been to the facilities. I've been to the bridge areas where we would expect most of the individuals to try to gain attention of our immigration officials. So I know the circumstances, how they've existed. The challenge we have is that it's a very dangerous situation of those that have attempted to enter our country from the southern border. They usually pay illegal people who are involved in illegal trafficking in order to get to our border. They pay a lot of money. They're promised things that are not realistic or not real. There's many times it's a very dangerous voyage. Many people lose their lives in transit. It's just not a safe situation for people coming to our country. Secondly, when they reach the borders, there's an uncertainty as to what's going to happen. The policies have been anything but consistent over the last several years. If someone's seeking asylum, they should be able to present themselves, make their case, have it heard in a timely way, and be able to stay safe during the asylum process. But under President Trump, they were not allowed to come into the country to make the claim. They were held in camps south of our border. In some cases, they tried to sneak into our country by crossing through the river rather than through the bridge. Again, at tremendous risk, many losing their lives. It was just a chaotic situation. We didn't have an orderly process. So first and foremost, we need an orderly process. And what the Biden administration is hoping to be able to achieve is working with our partner countries, particularly in our own hemisphere, to establish a process that an individual, before they make arrangements to come to our border, know the status of their case, that they can be heard and they know where they're heading and they know their future. We recognize in some cases that cannot be done because of safety issues. We have to take that into consideration, and there are alternative ways to handle those types of cases, but we have to have an orderly process. And I am quite confident that's exactly what the Biden administration is trying to do. But how do you get from where we are today to that type of process when you still have thousands of people that are in transit or somewhere along the process? So we have to have a transition period that we deal with people who are in desperate need. And that's been a real challenge with our facilities, with messaging to those who are caught in the system. We're hoping to have clearer direction. I can tell you, many of us have been urging the Biden administration to make this a very, very high priority.
Thank you very much, Senator Cardin. I'll give you the one last questions here. It seems like having strong international outreach like that provided by Maryland Department of Commerce and Global Chamber Baltimore can help in the recovery, economic recovery. How important do you value exports and foreign direct investment and global business in the coming months and years?
Well, it's a great question. We're in a global economy, make no mistake about it. So we have to be able to compete within the global community. It's in our interest to do that, but we want to make sure we have a level playing field. You're asking a question in a very timely manner because in this coming week or next week in the United States Senate, we hope to take up a competitiveness bill that deals primarily with China. And the fact that China is trying to change the global rules towards the economies based upon government intervention more so than in a free market economy. And they do certain things that are not consistent with the international norm, including the way they handle intellectual property and similar types of policies. So we have to compete in a global economy. We want to compete in a global economy. We have to have a trained workforce to do that. We have to have the right economic incentives for capital investment in our country. And we need a fairer international tax system. So one of the challenges that the Biden administration is trying to tackle is how do you deal with business taxes globally so that American businesses are not at a disadvantage, and whether we can get international rules in regards to taxation. And that's an area that we're going to be working on very, very hard over the next few months as we look at changing our tax structure to be fair to the American people, but more competitive globally. So we very much believe in open markets. America has one of the most open markets in the world. We do think American manufacturers, producers, and farmers can do very well in international competition as long as there's a level playing field. And we recognize when you define level playing field, it's not always the same in the eyes of the beholder. So we have to figure out a way that we can get trade rules that make sense. I serve on the Senate Finance Committee, and that's one of our principal areas of legislative concern.
Great. Thank you very much, Senator Ben Cardin, for your great the insight and sharing your perspective with us today. I have a lot more questions here, but for the time, I will share this with the office later on to follow up. But I appreciate it again, and thank you very much.
Oh, my pleasure. Everybody stay well. And again, thank you for having me. I appreciate it very much.
All right, Lene.
Thank you so much, Senator Cardin. Thank you for sharing your insights in this important conversation. And thank you, Mijong. I would like to now introduce Jessica Weiss. She's an immigration attorney with our partner for today's event, Weiss and Moy PC. And she will lead an information session with a very special guest who is with us today.
Thank you, Linaire. Very much appreciate your introduction. I just wanted to add a few comments about Senator Cardin and what he said. As you can see from the information he gave today, he's working really hard to make some really important changes for immigration in our field and for the prosperity of Americans. And so I just wanted to add as well the PPP program and the help to small businesses and venture capital for minorities. These are all wonderful programs that are going to directly help foreigners that come here and want to start their lives here and build businesses. Now I want to introduce the Consul General, Susan Harper of the, so she's Consulate General of Canada in Miami. She's the head of it. She's been with that position since 2016. Her office is very warm, very welcoming. I've done a presentation there once for a staff, a very, very knowledgeable staff. Her office services Florida, Puerto Rico, and the US Virgin Islands, helping Canadians who come here that need services, consulate services, and other services as well. And our relationship, Florida, because that's where our office is located, our relationship between Florida and Canada is very important. Almost 620,000 jobs are provided between Canada and people in Florida. So I'm really happy to introduce her. It's so kind of her to come here and say a few introductory words and support as well during this time. So I'm going to give it over to the Consul General, Susan Harper.
Thank you very much, Jessica. And I really appreciate this opportunity just to complement the presentation that Senator Cardin has just made, but also what you are presenting now to both, I think, Canadians and non-Canadians who are looking to have some information from this session. First, some people may wonder, why is the Consul General of Canada speaking on an activity that is really about US government policies and practices? And of course, I'm not in any position, no one at the Consulate General of Canada would be able to speak about those elements. But we thought it might be helpful just to recognize the situation that exists between Canada and the United States, because the reality is that there are a lot of inquiries from Canadians at the moment. Currently, the Canada-US border is closed. And as the Prime Minister has said, this is not the time to travel. For us, there is a safety and health priority that is paramount here. And that's the reason that the border is closed. We are in very different situations at the moment in dealing with COVID. But given the integration of the economies, and frankly, for many of us, our lives, still there are essential crossings taking place. They need to take place. That would include health workers. That would include some truck drivers who are taking our products to and from. And also it includes personal and family emergencies. So this is very difficult for those of us who have cross-border lives. I'm first generation Canadian. My mother was American. I have family in both countries. My son is currently an unemployed bartender in Toronto. I'm very aware of the challenge of having a cross-border life when the border is closed. We are dealing with things, and because we thought that it would be useful for some people who are looking at crossing the Canada-US border, we've provided a handout that Lanier will be able to circulate to people who are on this call, just with information on the Canadian regulations and policies. But we would like to underline that the Consulate General of Canada is available to Canadians for any consular assistance they need in this difficult period. And you can always reach us. We've got our coordinates on that handout as well. But we really, in this context, appreciate very much what Jessica Weiss and Lanier Robbins of the Global Chamber are offering to Canadians and to others who are being very affected by the international perspective of the COVID situation. So again, thank you to Jessica. Thank you to Lanier for this opportunity to speak today, but also for providing this kind of assistance to others. And so with that, back to you, Jessica.
Thank you so much, Consul General Susan Harper. We really, really appreciate you taking this time out of your busy schedule today to share a few words, words of encouragement, explaining a little bit about Canada, what's going on, if you want to go over there. So my presentation is going to be about, if you're coming to America, let's talk about how you can stay here, how you can work here possibly, or spend just a short trip here. So I'm going to, let's see, I'm going to share my screen. And wait, let's see 1 second. Hold on. Not sharing yet, right? Okay. 1 second, try it again. And slideshow, 1 more second. Okay, how's that? We're good?
Looks great.
Okay, great. Okay, so can COVID stop my entry into the United States if I'm Canadian? So this is my contact information, and I'm going to go through about 35 minutes or so talking about this issue in different ways. And to give, I'm optimistic. There are ways to come here short and long term, and that is what I'm going to talk about. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat box and we'll answer them at the end. We'll allow a little bit of time at the end for it. But thank you so much, by the way, to Lanier, to Mijong, and to Doug for letting me have this opportunity to do this presentation. So let's get started. So if a Canadian person wants to come to the United States, how do they come here? They either come here by land or sea or by air. So I often get the question, what's the easiest way to come here? Right now, the easiest way is by air. Why do I say that? Because if you don't need a visa to enter the United States, which many Canadians do not need, a visa, just I'm sure most of you know, but it's a sticker in the passport. It's basically a ticket to enter the United States. You have to apply for it at the US Consulate in Canada. There's different consulates depending on what type of visa you need that you apply for. So if you don't need one of those and you want to enter the United States, you have to comply with our rules here on you need a viral test within 3 calendar days of travel, or provide documentation of recovering from COVID in 90 days preceding your travel. So that's what it takes. And you need the proper intent, which we'll talk about in another slide. If you want to come to the United States by sea or by land, you must have proper documents through our Western Hemisphere Travel Initiative through the program, and you have to have an essential purpose. So Consul General Susan Harper was talking a little bit about what are some of the essential purposes. So in another slide, a couple slides from now, we're going to go through that in a little more detail so you understand. But it's not so, they're very specific what they are, and that's why if someone says they need to come to the States, I say get on a plane and come that way. I just threw a little bit of information at the bottom. There are people that are considered Native Americans, and they can come here through the borders and through the air, et cetera, without certain same restrictions as other people. Okay, so now a little more specifics. if you're coming to the United States by land or by sea. So I know obviously with Canadians, it's mostly by land, but some of the essential reasons people can come here. So if you're a US citizen, of course you can come into America. Green card holder, yes. Medical purposes, students can come here. F1 students, M1 students, J1. Some other reasons here, like if you're working in a medical facility, you can come in, military personnel. So you can see they're very specific reasons. And if you don't meet them, you're not going to be able to get in by land. So for example, someone says, I live right near the border and I want to come in because I'm just visiting family, you know, an hour or two into the United States, they're going to travel. And they say, I'm sorry, you're visiting for pleasure. You can't come in, but you can get in by air with the right intent, the right paperwork. You should be able to get in. So it's very important. What is your intent? And do you have the proper documentation to enter the United States? And I can just tell you, I have one time I had a woman who was she was dating someone in the United States, and her future husband, turns out, he was not able to get into Canada. She was trying to get into the United States just to visit him. The officer says, we see in your record that you worked in the United States. You made about $500. So she says, that's not really work, but says, I'm sorry, we won't let you in. So she contacted me, and I was able to show through documentation that it's technically, yes, she got paid for work, but technically it was an employment contract. There was no W-2. There was no commitment, you know, that she was going to continue working in that situation. And she said, I'm really sorry. I really didn't know it was work. And the officer said, okay, we'll let you in. He let her in. They continued dating, and they eventually did get married. So with the right intent, some good things can come about. Okay, so let's move on. Next slide. Border entry kit. So what is this all about? Some of you may have heard, or maybe you know someone, when they come to the United States, they have a bunch of documents on them to show their correct intent. It's very important when you enter the United States, whether by land, by sea, or by air, to have documentation on you. What kind of documentation? You need to have things to show that you plan to return to your home country, if that's depending on what you're coming in for to the United States. So for example, if you're coming in to visit, which a lot of Canadians are snowbirds and they have homes in the United States and they're just coming to visit for a short amount of time. So I always tell them, have proof that you have a home in Canada. If you don't have a home, have proof of the lease, have investments. Maybe you have a job still in Canada. Maybe you own a company there. Maybe you have insurances, bank accounts. And sometimes we even ask them to print a family tree and let's see who you have there, what kind of families left. Because if you have almost no ties to your home country, then when you try to enter, let's say as a tourist, they're going to say, we don't think you're a tourist, you're planning to immigrate. And sometimes we even get letters from family members stating, I know this family member and I think they're going to return. I really think they're coming back. They're just visiting. And of course, if you're flying in, a round trip ticket is very important to have because that shows for sure you have a date that you're planning to leave. So border entry kit, I can't recommend enough. So this slide I'm going to show you is lawful intent. What is your intent when you're coming in? These are some of the popular categories that Canadians will use to come to the United States. They'll come in as a business visitor and show proof that they're coming in for a meeting. They'll come in for pleasure, again, only by air. They could come in possibly for a TN, which is a professional working category. They have to meet one of the criteria on, it's a new agreement we have between the US, Mexico, and Canada, saying if you meet certain categories and you have the right degree, you can come into the United States and work. There's one catch-all, management consultant, and I'll show you that in another slide. But that's another way that people can come in on a TN from Canada and no visa required. So that's great. You don't have to go to a consulate. An L1A is an intercompany manager executive from Canada. There's a company there and they're coming to the United States to work at the company here. It's another way to come in. And I'm just mentioning these now briefly, and then I'm going to go into it in more detail as we go through a few more slides. O1A is actually one of my favorites. It's extraordinary ability. So if you have extraordinary ability on a national or international scale, you can come to the United States and you need an employer for an O1A, but it's a great way to come here. And I've met some really interesting people on O1As, and then F1 and M1 students. So this is very important because students are concerned, how do they get back to the United States if they go home to Canada or other countries? And so there is a way for them to come back in. They just have to show the proper documentation and they don't need a visa if they're coming from Canada. And the reason I emphasize this, whether they need a visa or not need a visa, because there's so much delay right now in issuance of visas. So if you don't need a visa, then it's better to go that way, as a way to come into the US without needing a visa. So let's say you're a Canadian and you want to come to the United States, you're a Canadian tourist. What do I need to know to enter the United States? Very important. A Canadian who wants to come to the United States, they must check the I-94 record. Years ago, when Canadians would come in, they would just show like, their passport or whatever, and they get it stamped and they're good to go. And they think likely they look at the date on there and that tells them how long they can stay. But now there's no stamping in the passport pretty much, and you need to go into the system. So I put for you here on the screen the I-94 website that anyone can access. You, with your passport in front of you, you plug in some information and it tells you how long you can stay. Now, Canadians, over the years, I've been practicing 23 years, and I have many Canadian clients who say to me, I don't know how long I can stay, I am not in the system or whatever, and I tell them the max a Canadian can stay is 6 months. So remember that, because people think, oh, I can just stay as long as I want. Sometimes they don't keep track of their amount of time in the United States, Canadians. And I had one woman once that she was trying to come into the United States and did not keep track of her time. And the officer did a calculation right then and there on the spot and determined that she had overstayed, that she'd been in the United States way more than 6 months. And then she also had additional time back and forth. And during a 1-year period, the officer said, you've really been here almost a year. What's going on? So it can be very problematic. So that's why I emphasize that. The other thing is, when you're coming to the United States by air, let's say, I would call the airline and I would ask them, what do they require for you to board? Just make sure, because things are changing so quickly that you want to make sure that. And then I just mentioned the vaccine card. Is it a viable option? And on the next screen or so, I'm going to talk about the vaccine card because it's becoming a little bit more popular, as I see in the news and et cetera. So when you come to the United States, are you going to come for 6 months? Are you going to come for longer? Are you going to change your status? These are some questions that we start talking about as someone decides when they enter, what are they doing? Or how long do they want to stay? And we're going to go through that in another slide to deal with some of those questions. And how long can I stay here? And so I just would tell you one thing, that when Canadians come here and they come in, let's say as a B2 tourist, if they want to extend their status, so let's say you come in, you get your 6 months, and then you want another 6 months, because you can have a max of 1 year as a tourist. So I would say, don't do that usually, because the processing times are so bad right now. It's roughly 10 to 11 months to get an approval on a B2 extension. And by the time you get the approval, your request for that additional 6 months, it's already finished. So we only use these B2 extensions to get to another status. So it's like a procedural move, we use them, but I really don't advise it. And there may be other, if there's crises, if there's medical emergencies, there's different reasons that you would need them. So this is passport vaccination. This is the passport vaccination issue. What do you need to know about it right now? The US federal government does not have a policy right now that they require it everywhere. So it is not mandatory. The European Union has a digital green card certificate. Israel has developed a Green Pass smartphone application, and New York is piloting the IBM Excelsior Pass. So they have just said recently, you may have seen in the news, that if you want to go to an NFL football game in New York, they're going to require proof that you've been vaccinated. So these are some of the things going on right now. There's also, I just heard recently that Hawaii is doing something, Orange County in Los Angeles is going to have something. I know that Texas and Florida are totally against it, having any kind of passport vaccination requirement. So what are the issues behind this? Why is this becoming more and more, let's say, popular? And what are the concerns? So concern, as I list for you on the bottom here, is privacy issues. What if you're completely opposed to getting a vaccine, and now you're not going to be able to go to certain things because you don't show proof you've been vaccinated. So you feel that your privacy is being invaded. On the other hand, there are people that say, I don't want to be at a major event if I don't know everyone there is vaccinated. So you've got to weigh the private concerns versus the public concerns. You also have states that are deciding that they want to have certain rules for vaccination passports, and others saying we're not going to have it. So I'm not sure how that's going to play out in the long term, but also you have different vaccines. So what if one vaccine is more effective than another? Will the fact that you show, I have Pfizer, let's say, and the other person has J&J, are they not going to get as many benefits because maybe one vaccine is weaker than the other? So there's still a lot of unknown with the vaccine passport issue, but just it's good for you to know it's out there. It's not a federal policy right now. So if you come to the United States, it's not going to be mandatory. And I was just reading recently as well that what if you're vaccinated in America and now you're going to your home country because you're not from here. It's not some global system of passport vaccination. So will they recognize that you were vaccinated in America? Because there's a bunch of people, as you might have read in the news, that are coming here just to get vaccinated because certain countries are going very slow at the vaccination process. So they're coming here for short trips, foreigners, and they're going back and now they're vaccinated. So there's a bunch of issues surrounding this. And I'm sure we'll hear more and more about it as time goes on. Okay, so back to some of the immigration things that I want to talk about. So I mentioned to you at the very beginning of my presentation, there are a bunch of categories that you need a visa for if you want to come to the United States. I list for you them here. So you've got E2s, foreign investors coming to the United States, E1s, which is if there's trade in Canada or services and they want to create some connection with the United States, continuing that trade or service. It can go either direction. You could have the trade or service in America, and then it's being used in Canada, K1 fiancé visas. You have K3 V1s. These are for spouses of green card holders and US citizens. And then you have some governmental visas, the A's and G's, as well as any of the immigration cases that are set up for what's called consulate processing through the consulates. So why is everything taking so long? There is tremendous backlog. There is 500,000 cases in the queue through the National Visa Center. This is the center that processes the cases. Once the first part is approved in America, then it has to go through the National Visa Center. And then from there, it goes on to the consulates to continue with the process for many visa applications. So 500,000, that is a lot of cases. Another statistic for you, interesting to note, is the E2, non-immigrant investor visa, which I happen to do a lot of work in. The E2, 2 years ago, the Department of State said in February of 2019, the new E2 visas, which are processed at the US Consulate in Toronto, they had processed 203 of them. And then in 2021 in February, obviously, while COVID's going on, 47 have been processed. So you can see that there is a big difference in the amount of processing of the E2 visas. The good news is it looks like that the immigration cases, the family-based ones, I see that there is more processing going on of those. So because I know there is a policy, they're trying to really bring families together. So this is just something to keep in mind. If you need a visa, it's going to be a slow process. How long? I do not have estimates exactly how long, and the consulates will not give that information. Okay, so next slide. Specific popular ways for Canadians to come to the United States. So what are some specific popular ways? So I would say one of the more popular ways is E2, E1. So I mentioned to you that briefly. It's still going on. It's definitely a popular way for people to come here. But what I'm seeing now more of is people will enter the United States, let's say as a business visitor. And then after 90 days, because we have a policy that says if you do something inconsistent with your intent when you come in, like as a visitor, tourist, then in those 90 days, then when you file your case to change your status, they're going to say you didn't have the right intent when you came in, and so your case is denied. So I tell people that are interested in possibly looking into buy a US business or start one for an E2, I say, come in on a B1, have the right intent. Say to the officer, I'm thinking about buying a US business, and if you have evidence through your border entry kit to show you're starting a contract or you have set up an LLC or whatever, bring that evidence, and then we wait on day 91, we file your case, and this is what I'm doing for E2s right now, because E2s are taking a very long time to process. So TNs are not taking as long to process. They are done actually at the port of entries and at designated airports. So those are moving along pretty quickly. And I'll just tell you one story. So I had a woman that she had 2 part-time TNs. She was Canadian, and she wanted a 3rd one. And she said, oh, one of my part-time ones, I'm gonna stop, and then I'll start another one once I get that 3rd TN. So because she's from Canada and she was living in Phoenix, she said, can't I just go to the US-Mexican border and get my TN? So because we have this treaty, the USMCA treaty, that allows her also to process her case at the US-Mexican border, that's exactly where she went. So she got her TN. She was considered an essential worker because she was a physical therapist working with elderly people and with those that had COVID with side effects. And she got her TN and came back into the United States. And the TN's good for 3 years. So it worked out really nicely for her. The other one is the O&A. These are becoming more and more popular because these involve, you just file it in the United States. And then if you want to activate it, you can either, if you did a change of status, once it's approved, then it's activated, you can start working on it. Or if you need to leave the United States and re-enter for some reason, you can't do a change of status, then you could just show your approval notice and you're in, you're back in. And these are good for 3 years initially. And then the L1A, Intercompany Manager Executive. These are also being done at ports of entry and designated airports. And they have to be called in, you have to call them in advance to make sure that they are doing them. But this is just an overview of 4 popular areas that are still being done. These are still ways for Canadians to come here. And I'm going to go into in a little more detail now. So as I said at the beginning of the presentation, I love doing E2 investor visas. Some of my favorite work is E2s and O1As, extraordinary ability. So E2, how does this work? So we have to have a treaty with Canada, which we do, and you have to invest or be actively involved in investing a substantial amount of money. You're not going to find anywhere where it says, what is substantial? I tell my clients anywhere between 100 and 150,000. I mean, I have an E2 client, he's invested $1 million in a venture capital business, and he's still an E2. So it doesn't matter, how much, how large it is, but definitely it should be a reasonable figure. So 2 full-time employees they'd like you to have. 2 full-time employees, if you don't have them at the time you file your case, you can show shortly after you file how you're going to get those employees. And the investment has to come from a legal source. So I had a client once that said, oh, I have plenty of money, no problem. I transferred the money from my bank account in my home country to a Swiss bank account, and I didn't pay any taxes, and it was great. I was able to transfer it. And I said, this is not going to work for an E2 because the funds have to come from a legal source, and I need to be able to trace it. And then you either can buy an existing business or create your own. And believe me, over the years, I've had people, it's their dream to create their own business. They take a few months to get it going a little bit before, and the doors open, and then we file their case. And as I said a little bit earlier in a slide, you can either file it with the consulate, right? And you wait for the processing of it. The consulate will give you a 5-year visa. 5-year visa. So when you enter the United States, you show your passport and they give you 2-year status. And I know this is confusing a lot of times to Canadians, but you only have 2 years to stay here at a time. When you get to the end of the visa, which is a 5-year visa, I would say roughly about 6 months before it's going to expire, you're going to need to renew it. So, and then you'll have to go to the consulate again and renew it. But the other way to do it is called either extension of an E2 if you already have it and you're in the US. You can process it in the United States, or a change of status to E2. As I mentioned earlier, if you came in like as a business visitor and you wanted to change your status to E2, you could do that. So there are 2 ways to process the E2. Now, the challenges right now during COVID times is if you want to do a change of status to E2, the main investor can file their case and get an answer in 30 calendar days. You pay an extra $2,500 and you'll get an answer. But the dependents, the wife or the husband and the kids, their case is on a different track, and they have to wait roughly 8 to 10 months for an answer on their case. So it gets a little complicated because what you really want is the visa, because the visa allows you to travel in and out of the United States. But because processing is going so slow at the consulates right now, they're only doing really emergency cases, essential workers, essential cases. Change of status is really working out nicely for many people right now. And the other thing is that the dependent spouse can get a work permit. So once the change of status takes place, the dependent spouse applies for the work permit. Let's say it takes 5 to 8 months to get. You can request an expedite, but they're hard. They're definitely hard to get. And I always get this question. I'm an E2. Am I ever going to get out of E2? It goes on forever. Every 5 years, I renew the visa. And the answer is yes. I have done cases where people have come out of E2. I can just recall one, a Canadian gentleman came to me and he had 20 years he was in E2. And he said, how am I ever going to get out of E2? I said, if you find yourself a sponsor, you have 2 years of full-time work experience in your field, you can try to go for a green card, but you will need to work for that sponsor once you get the green card. And he was like, anything I can do to get out of it. And he did. He found his sponsor and he got out of it. Okay, so TN professional workers. Another category, often I get the question, why not do H-1B? If you're a Canadian citizen, TN is a great way to go. You're not subject to the H-1B quotas. There's only certain times a year that you can file the H-1B. The TN is available. There is a list of occupations and degrees required. If you meet it, it works. Like I mentioned to you earlier, the woman who was a physical therapist, she had to have all her degrees required, proper licensing and certifications in the US. And once she met those requirements and she had a US employer, it works. She just went to the border and then she came back in. They have management consultant is the catch-all category, I would say, for TNs. What I mean is that often people will call me and say, I don't fit any of the categories for TN. And I say to them, tell me about your work experience. So they'll say, well, I did some consulting perhaps. And I said, how many years? So if they had 5 years of management consulting in a particular field, that they're going to come to the United States and also do consulting in, that might work for a TN. Or if they have a specific degree in a field that they're coming to do consulting in, again, that might work. They're definitely harder to get approved because they don't fit exactly into the box, but it is a great way to come to the United States, a TN. So next category is O&A. So as I said, O&A is one of my favorite categories. So why do I love O&A so much? I'm going to tell you a story of an O&A I got approved recently, COVID-related case. So gentleman contacted me and he said, I'm one of the top wet wipe producers, he's a manager of a manufacturing plant abroad. And I said, okay, so what makes you so extraordinary? He started explaining to me all the details of how to make wet wipes, that you clean surfaces on. And he said, they're opening up a company in the United States. They already have significant investors and they need my expertise to come to the United States. So I said to him, okay, let's see if you're O&A. So O&A, extraordinary ability, can be in any field. You see sciences, education, business, athletics. You need to meet 3 of the 8 or so criteria. So this gentleman, I said to him, tell me about your experience. He says, I've received some awards for excellence in my field, and my businesses have gotten the places that I've worked for, and I've played key roles. I've created things, original things that I've patented in the wet wipe industry. There's been articles about the companies that I've helped expand, branches that I've helped expand, and I've sat on panels. And also, I've written some material about the scientific origins of different things in the wet wipes industry or whatever. So at first you would think, how is he extraordinary ability wet wipes manager? But you know what? Every case has to be looked at closely, because I have taken some people that have over the years said, there's no way I'm extraordinary. And I've made them extraordinary for O&A purposes. And they love it. They're like, when they get their case approved, they're like, I'm extraordinary. Okay, I guess I am. Immigration says I am. So for an O&A, you need an employer. You must have an employer. And you also have to have a 3-year itinerary showing what you're going to do over the 3-year period, because O&A is given out for 3 years, and then you can get 1-year extensions. And this is a great category right now for anyone who doesn't fit a lot of the other categories. I'll just give you one more example. A Canadian businessman that produced, let's see, he was responsible for developing hotels in Canada, advising banks in Canada, and he was asked to come to the United States to continue building a hotel chain business. And when I started to hear all this, that he was at a very high level in his field, I said, maybe you're an O&A. Not only was he an O&A, he went on to green card, because it's the same criteria pretty much in O&A as a green card. And he went on to get a green card, and his wife got a green card. And originally he was set up for a green card processing in the US, and his wife was set up for consulate processing. And we switched her, so she finished her case in America, because things were getting so crazy with COVID and all the delays at the consulate. So O&A is really a wonderful way to come here if you meet the criteria. And L1A, another category, when I first started practicing and worked with Chinese companies sending over their import-export managers to the United States. So basically, you have to have US and foreign company owned in similar proportions by the same person or entities. The foreigner coming over had to have worked for one of the last 3 years as a manager or executive before coming to the United States, and both businesses have to stay active. So how does this work? So let me give you an example. I had a gentleman who owned a restaurant in the Bahamas, and he thought the Bahamian food is so delicious that I want to make a franchise in the United States. So he supervised as CEO, 50 employees. He was 100% owner of that company, of the restaurant. And he came to the United States and opened up one operation, but getting ready to open up a second one. He had about 10 workers, and that's an L1A. So he got approved, and now he's opening up more branches. So of his Bahamian restaurant with interesting different types of Bahamian food. So that's L1A. And students. So at first when COVID hit, people were getting concerned, like how Are students going to get in, et cetera? But students do get in, and they do get in from Canada easier than other countries because you don't need a visa. You don't have to go to the consulate. So for example, what do you need? So documents I list for you here, they need a Canadian passport. They need a form, the I-20 or the DS-2019. That form is issued by the school that they're going to go to. They need proof of CVIS fee payment. That's a fee that's paid through the school system. Proof of ability to pay school fees and living expenses in the US. So these are documentation. Again, this is part of your border entry kit that often is, that I strongly recommend people bring. And they show all this to the officer at the port of entry. So they are able to enter through land, through air, or through sea. But students, of course, have to maintain their student status by going to school full time. So that's important. Okay, so now we're moving on. Just wanted to cover this a little bit because there are a lot of people that are in situations right now, they're stuck in the middle. And what I mean by stuck in the middle is they have a part of their green card case that's processing, but now it's not finished. So let's say you have someone that was going for an EB-5, like a green card, based on investing a significant amount of money in the United States. And their case is just sitting, waiting to process at the consulate, nothing's happening. So they can come to the United States as a business visitor. They would show proof that their case is pending. They would show, if they're flying in, return ticket. They would show ties to their home country, but there are ways for them to come in. Also, sometimes I have clients that say to me, with all this COVID going on, maybe I should just switch and file my case, in America and finish it in America. So it's very important when they enter the United States, if they're coming in, let's say as a tourist, and they have a green card case pending, they need to show that their intent to remain in the United States to finish their green card case took place after they entered. Because if that intent is not the correct intent when they enter, we cannot use that entry to file their green card case. So it's very, very important. And I can give you story after story of people that are having issues with this, that, they don't have the right intent. They file adjustment of status, their green card case process in the US, and they think they're good for a while. Then they go to the actual interview with the officer, and the officer starts asking them questions. What was your intent when you came in? What are your ties in America? What are your ties back home? And then if it's a marriage case, they can separate the two of you and really start asking questions. And if they feel something suspicious, the whole case could get denied. So you need the right intent when you come in, and then things happen, changes occur, and you want to process your case in America, that's a different story. So I want to give you some reminders. So I've given you some overviews now of some very popular categories that Canadians will use to come to the United States. So this presentation may be, you may not be Canadian, you may be American, but you may know someone that is really thinking about coming to the United States and they don't know how or what to do. So this is some very important information, some reminders. Remind them, when you come to the United States, have the correct intent. You can have a border entry kit. You can, with the correct intent, if you wait 90 days, if you're coming in as a visitor, then you could change your status to something else, okay? It's very important that 90-day wait when you come in as a visitor. They're very suspicious that you don't have the right intent. Now, if you want to remain in the United States and extend your status, I do not recommend extending the B status. And I mentioned that a little bit earlier as well. And then if you're traveling, here's something interesting. It's good for you to know. If you know somebody that has an E2 visa, let's say, and it's coming to the end of the visa. So you look at their status, right? You go online to the I-94 system and you see how long they can stay here. If they're running out of time on their status and their visa is close to expiring, the US and Mexican border has said that they will renew the E2 status, not the visa. They'll renew their status. They'll extend it for another 2 years. So this is a strategy that we use when someone needs coming to the end of their visa and their status is getting close to expiring too. And they know that to get another visa is going to take a long time. And also to extend their status in the US is a whole process with paperwork and applications, et cetera. So they do this very quickly and they'll do this for them. You're not considered to have left the United States if you do this. As well, I've just checked with Customs Border Patrol, even on Friday, with a Canadian airport that said, I said, if someone comes to your country and they want to do a change of status, like let's say they're a tourist and they're going for a TN and they don't leave the airport and they just want to change their status and then leave. Not leaving the airport, they said, yes, they can do that. We just turn them around and they go right back. and they're not subject to the quarantine rules in Canada because they've not left the airport. So every situation has to be checked with a competent immigration attorney before anyone starts traveling or changing statuses. It's very important. Okay, so I know we're coming closer to the end of my presentation, so I just want to add a few more slides and then take questions and answers. So what if you need a visa? So I keep talking about in this presentation that if you don't need a visa, hopefully you won't because it's such a long process. So, but if you do need a visa, here's what happened. So basically routine visas got suspended in March of 2020. And after that, consulates in July of 2020 said, okay, we can start resumption of routine visa services when we're ready. Well, it has been very difficult for consulates because of all the second, third waves of COVID. In Europe, it's been very difficult. Lots of appointments getting scheduled and canceled. And then in August of 2020, consular officers said, if you're applying for the same type of visa and you already have it in your passport, you may not have to come in for an interview. So I was all excited. I thought many of my E2 clients, they wanted to renew with Toronto, the US Consulate in Toronto, they'll get a call right away and they could just send their passports in. Doesn't work that way. They are processing them as fast as they can, but it's not that fast. And I seriously have cases in the queue for 10 or 11 months waiting for this and nothing's happening yet. So we just have to wait. We have to wait. If you need a visa, I hope if there's another way to do it, I recommend it. Okay, so if you do need a visa, okay, what are we supposed to do? So now I've given you lots of information on if you don't need a visa, great, come to America. But if you do need one, you have to file the proper paperwork. You have to put the visa application in, and then I would say contact an immigration attorney if you don't have a direct email for the consulate and explain to them the emergency or essential reason why you need that visa. I just put in it for you here on this slide. It's not relevant to Canadians, but just for other people listening to the presentation, that certain countries, you need to apply to come into the United States. You may have a visa, but you need permission to come in because we're concerned about a lot of COVID cases. So from Brazil and China, South Africa, Iran, and also from the Schengen area, which is countries like Ireland, the UK, France, most of Europe, you need permission to come in. If you don't want to go to the consulate and get that permission, you can spend 14 days in a country that's not that doesn't have this requirement, and then show proof that you spent those 14 days and you should be able to get in. So Mexico's been very popular, the Caribbean, there's a bunch of countries there that people are going to try to come in. Okay, so next slide, immigrant visa. So if you have a case in the queue and you're waiting and you don't know how long it's going to be, go to this website, ceac.state.gov, and they can give you updated information. And also you could be missing documentation. So if you're trying to get in on a fiancé visa or to immigrate and you're concerned what happened to my case, there's a way to check it and see what's going on here. And I did mention to you a little bit about a strategy of coming into the United States with your border entry kit. So I'm not going to go over that. Okay, so this slide, actually, it's interesting. I do a lot of work with foreign athletes. So when COVID hit, my athletes were a mess because they were training for the Olympics and then they got canceled, and then the Olympics are on again, and then the White House granted them permission to enter the United States. They're considered special category. Then they took that away. So there's been a lot of ups and downs with the athletes. Canadians can still enter by land, sea, or air if they're an athlete, but they want to know, what are you doing here? Are you just training here or are you competing here? Do you have an event that requires internationally recognized athletes? And that is what they want to know. And what happened was a bunch of competitions got canceled at the beginning of the COVID crisis. And the officers were saying, there's nothing for you to come here for because you're not competing. But now the competitions are back on, a lot of them. There's no audience, but they are competing. So my athletes, a lot of them move on to, they become coaches, medical professionals. I do a lot of work in the sports immigration field, and things are still moving along, and there are ways to do these cases, but they have to be done very carefully, showing that US competitions, one a year, they have to be in at least one a year. So, okay, so I wanted to just give you some reminders at the end of my presentation and also share one little story with you. So very important to plan your trip out, because what are your long-term goals? What are your short-term goals? You need to know when you're coming into the US, if you say, I'm just visiting family for a couple of weeks, fly in and do that. and please have a return ticket. But if you're really thinking about staying longer, it needs to be planned out. And that's where an immigration attorney comes in, because we talk to you about the long-term consequences, the short-term, because often my clients will say, well, my children want to go to school here, and technically your children should not go to school here if you're a tourist. That's not allowed. So we have to plan these things out. And one couple that I spoke to recently said, well, why would we come here sooner than that? My kids need to go to school. It's just not going to work. And it doesn't sometimes. Also, don't assume again that you're going to get a visa interview right away. Some of my clients will buy businesses and say, oh, this is a COVID related business. I know it's going to work. I am sitting on a case right now that we are so sure this is a COVID related business because she's developing natural and organic hand sanitizer sprays. And state of the art, it's very healthy, very effective. Tests have been done. And we're still waiting to see if they're going to treat it like an emergency case. So when you're entering the United States, always have the correct intent. And if you tell the truth when you enter, then you won't have any problems with misrepresentation, bring the correct documentation. So I wanted to share one story with you as I get closer to closing. I had a gentleman the other day I was speaking to, I'm helping him on a case, and he's doing a janitorial business. And I said to him, he's from Canada, and I said, let's see if we have a COVID angle on this. So he said, of course we do. He goes, we are cleaning office buildings with the state-of-the-art, healthiest chemicals that fight COVID. And he said, I think we've got an argument. And I said, okay, look, we can try it. You never know. But he said, I'm sitting in my apartment in Montreal. And he said, it's so hard because there's another lockdown and we're limited what we can buy at the stores and how often we can go out and what times of day we can go out, et cetera. And he said, but knowing that I'm able to, move forward on my case, file the paperwork, get in the system, and that I have opportunity is so important to me. And that's really why I'm here doing this presentation, because yes, Consul General Susan Harper said that there are, they're closed. Canada is closed. It's very tough. If a Canadian wants to go home, they have quarantine rules and it's expensive, but there are Canadians that come here with the right intent, of course, and then they want to stay. So I am here to tell you there are opportunities, but it has to be done the correct way. Timing is very important with the right documentation. And I'm happy to be a resource. But I think that's it. And I'm happy to take questions. And thank you.
Thanks so much, Jessica. We do have a couple of questions from the Q&A. So I'll go ahead and read the first one. I learned Canada allows medical persons with pending immigration issues, especially nurses who attended to COVID-19 patients, to automatically qualify for residency. Do you think the US could enact such a law?
Wow, it's such a good question. And it just seems on the surface, they should totally enact a law like that. But I have had calls from people at the front in hospitals in New York saying, how is it possible that I have a J1, let's say, and my time's running out and I can't do anything about it to go for a green card because there's no policy in place, there's no rules that allow me to stay here longer. And it's not in place. It's something that, perhaps Senator Cardin you could communicate with, or other senators, and see if they could put something in place like that. Because it's true, when you're fighting COVID at such a level and you're doing so much for our country, there should be something in place for a green card in that way. Yeah.
Thank you. Next question. I am a Canadian with an E2 visa who has been here for 14 years and cannot get a green card. Why does the government make it so difficult for Canadians with an E2 visa? Basically asking why it's so difficult and what can they do?
Okay. So I hear this a lot. You're not alone. And one of my clients, I think it was 25 years, they had an E2, long time, 20 or 25 years, but I did take them out of it. So it's really important to make sure that you've covered all your bases, that there's no possible way, because usually E2s, we look at all the employment-based categories for you. We make sure there's no way you qualify through a family petition. We really go thorough, like everything. And you're welcome to call me, and I always do a free brief consult, but I usually wind up putting them in EB3, as I mentioned a little earlier in the slides, because EB3 is you have to have 2 years of full-time work experience in a field that you're going to be working in on a permanent basis in America. Maybe you don't have that, but you know what? It's worth it to really go through all the categories and figure out what is it there's no way for you to move forward. And sometimes if you're married, we look to the spouse too to see maybe they qualify. Maybe it's not you, the E2 investor, but it could be the spouse that's going for the green card. And then you come in as a dependent on their application. So I love getting creative. So if there's a way out there, a legal way, of course, I try. So.
Thank you. And we just received one more question. Is the amount of time different for people from different countries based on nationality, the amount of time allowed in the US?
You mean as a visitor, I assume? Right?
It doesn't specify whether it's a visitor or an actual stay for longer.
Okay, I mean, there's so many categories, but if it's a visitor, they're allowed to stay 6 months at a time, and then they can do 1 6-month extension. But right, as I mentioned, it's not worth it right now to do the 6-month extension. So it's a maximum of 1 year. You could be in total a tourist, but there's so many categories. So no, there's no specific that a Canadian, the TN also works the same way. Mexicans can get 3-year TNs just like Canadians can. So yeah, I guess I'd have to know which category, but I don't think there's any really that discriminate or that expand it more for a Canadian over a Mexican.
And one more just came in. So if a person were to start the process of moving from Canada to the US, do they first have to ask their employer?
Okay, so is that the one from, it says, where do I have to start to get a TN visa
Yes.
to move? Okay, so the TN. So you need an employer. So you have to have a US employer. So the question is, there's all different types of US employers and all different types of arrangements. So if she's saying she has saying she has a Canadian employer, she has a US employer? I'm not sure which.
Not specific.
Okay, so if you have a US employer, you approach them and you say, I wanted to get a TN, I think I'm qualified. You get a hold of an immigration attorney, we put the paperwork together, and then you go to a port of entry or a designated airport that does these. And once you have it approved, you're ready to start working. I mean, you need to get a social security number, but you can't even get that till you show proof that you have a valid TN. And there is no visa. If you're coming from Canada, there's no visa. You don't need one for a TN.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Jessica. This has really been enlightening. Many thanks to Consul General Susan Harper as well, and also Senator Ben Cardin. I also want to give a special thank you to Mijong Hibbets from the Global Chamber, DC, Baltimore. She was fantastic to work with, as were you, Jessica. So thank you both very much.
Thank you so much.
We will go ahead and Mijong, I don't know if you want to say anything to our attendees.
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone, for attending, and especially, excellent speakers today, Senator Ben Cardin and Consul General Susan Harper and Jessica. Thank you very much. And especially thank you, Lanier, for this wonderful collaboration between two different metros. And I hope that this webinar was informative and insightful for all of you. And please reach out, to us along the way if you need any help in global businesses, because we are a network of businesses in 525 metros globally. So with that, thanks to everyone, and I hope you have a great week ahead.
Thank you. And also special thanks to our partners, to Weiss and Moy PC, and also to our promotional partner, the Miami-Dade County International Trade Consortium. Thank you both for all of your support. And good day, everyone. Take care. Hope to see you again soon.
Take care.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.